It has been such a long time, but hello everyone, Anita here and welcome to another video. Thank you so much for your patience. I am officially back. Today we are going to be working on my very first glass painting experiment. I have envisioned some time ago this sort of a bookshelf on top of my kitchen window that was supposed to be sort of like a Victorian greenhouse type of a deal with lots of plants and greenery. However, this turned out to be a south-facing window and all my plants burned except succulents. Like, I love my strings of pearls. So I've decided to, paint some bottles because I thought that would give them this, green hue that I wanted. And so I have been gathering some items from the secondhand store. I didn't end up using all of them. I have decided to use these two round little vases, one very tall vase, and then a lantern, which I was able to pull apart. And all of these paints came out of the lantern. And so, because I thought it would be really easy if I just placed them on top of a paper, and then I would draw on that paper a template that I could use for my lines. That worked for the flat paints. Not so very well for that vase. I thought it would work better because it is a cylinder, which, is pretty much a flat surface, just curved. However, the inside of that vase was a little bit curved at the bottom, so the paper didn't sit properly. So I ended up ditching it. However, drawing that pattern on top of the paper first really kind of got me to visualize better what I wanted to do. I really wanted to have a lot of green. And so I figured I would use some wavy shapes because I was a beginner. And I wanted to try some leaves. I didn't know if I could pull them off, I could make them. But I wanted to try. I wanted to try to make a shape that had a few more sections than just one wavy one. And so I've placed all my templates on the papers, and then I placed the glass on top of the paper. For this project, I've used a very cheap paint. It actually came in a set. And the set was, I believe, 150, something around €2 mark. I bought it at this Dutch store called Action a while back as well. And the set included a liner, which was like a relief paste in a little tubey. And it wasn't bad. At first I thought I just sucked at it. My hands are very shaky. And I just thought, I just sucked at it. But it turns out that I found an old tube of a different paste. And that one was a lot more stable and drew much more beautiful than this one. This one was very runny. It dried eventually properly, and it really gave me a good experience. However, I think it's not always good to use the cheapest materials. But it wasn't so bad. It was a good experience for sure. Like I said, my hands were very shaky. Now, I kind of have experience with using pastes in tubes. It comes from icing. It's a very similar experience to using an icing for icing cookies. You just have a tube. These tubes were not so squeezable, so it was a little bit harder to use them. However, I believe if I just had, for example, a cone like you would use for henna, I think that would have been much nicer because all those techniques can be used similarly. It's a tube full of paste, so as you can see here, I've kind of figured out that I won't be able to use the paper. I got pretty angry at that point. So I used my hand and I put it inside the vase, and that helped me to stabilize it. It was really hard to record at that angle and still show properly and be able to see properly. I have to say though that the more I drew with that liner, the better I became at it. And I feel like if I ever use a better liner, perhaps even I make my own little tubey, I will be able to, get really decent results. At this point, I should probably mention that this was my first try, but even before I tried making this little project, I have already decided to make a Tiffany lamp style faux glass painting ceiling lamp. I've decided to paint glass panels above my doors, indoor doors, as well as one of the windows that I have in the attic. So I have quite a lot of projects, lined up for this. So let's hope this works well. So here I am drawing, and I have to say the sections, it was really hard to connect them really seamlessly. Ever since I came back to drawing after my long hiatus, the entire motto of my art has been just accept the process, don't be a perfectionist, because that really ruins the entire experience for me. So I've decided to just overlook them. It is what it is. It doesn't have to be perfect at the first try, right? So all of these things, I put them in one of my closets. I emptied 2 shelves because I figured that once they are drying, they should probably stay away from dust. That also kept them in a really nice enclosed, space. And they dried for 3 days before they were done because, moisture levels were high. These little round vases were very much a lot of fun to paint. At this point, I was already feeling a little bit more confident with my skills. Still very shaky hands, but it's much easier to draw little circles than it is to make one continuous line. And if you're familiar with henna or with icing cookies, you know that most of the time you don't even paint on top of the surface. You just you have your little tubey lifted up from the surface and you let the line of your icing, or in this case of the liner, you let it fall on top of the surface, and then it's supposed to create a nice neat line, but it's trickier when you're actually doing it. So the paint that came in the set, I am pretty sure it was a solvent-based paint. It was definitely not water-based. That thing stunk so much that at some point I had to open the door to the studio, and so the light in the video is not very even because I had to open my door. I was so happy because I used my professional camera, and I really wanted to catch the sounds of painting because that's something I really love to hear when somebody else is painting, but it was impossible. There was just so much commotion outside. It was impossible to use that. So it's just me talking to you guys. And that paint, even though it was cheap, even though it smelled so bad, it was really nice to paint with. It was exactly what I expected. I started my painting with one type of green. So at this point, I really had an image of this entire project to be in different shades of green. However, in this set that I bought, and I bought 3 sets, in those sets, there were 5 different colors, only 1 green. However, there was also a yellow and a blue. So I figured that if I used the primary green first, and this is what I'm using right now, it's a very beautiful green, then I can add a little bit of yellow to it and then a little bit of blue to create different shades. And that's exactly what I did. I also tried experimenting a little bit with application. So as you can see here, I'm dabbing with the brush, and the brush was also included in the set. It was a very weird brush. At some point it split in half. There was some random hairs sticking out. But I wasn't sure how that paint would react with brushes, so I decided not to use my good brushes. And it's actually turned out well. You could take the brush and clean it with a little bit of alcohol. I had bioethanol, works perfectly fine. And so I just cleaned the brush, and I can still use it further. So I wanted to try, of course, creating as even layer of the paint as possible, and that was absolutely impossible for me to achieve. I think the paint was too thick for that. At first I tried to put a lot of paint to make it like fill in, almost level itself into the space, like you would expect maybe resin to do. However, it was too thick, maybe I didn't put enough. It dried also quite fast. It rather didn't dry, but it became tacky really fast. And so it wasn't possible. So I started experimenting with brush strokes and with dabbing and tapping. And I've learned that I really liked that really texture. That really textured surface. I really like that. And when I started, so I've accepted that already with the first layer of green. So when I started adding a little bit of yellow to my green to create that really nice spring green, I went all to town with dabbing. I wanted to see how far I can actually push it, actually. I wanted to see how much I could do with dabbing, what kind of textures I could get. So for example, I would have one very thin layer of paint laid down first, and I would do that of all the sections I wanted to paint. And then once that dried just a little bit, I would come back and dab on top of that, and that created really nice, like really saturated, really textured surface. After a while, I added some blue to that green mix, and that I tried brushing a little bit more so that you could really see those brush marks. And the reason for that is that this was my first project. I was still experimenting with what could and could not be done with paint. And of course, all different paints that I will probably purchase in the future will be different. However, I knew that I wanted to do more projects, so I wanted to establish what I could do so that I could then use that while imagining and planning for my other projects. I do that quite a lot with everything, really, so I wasn't surprised. The only thing I feel like it's not that I did it wrong, or I can't really say that, but I wish I did not use as much blue, because I really liked that really nice green, the first green that I used. It was almost like a bottle green color. I loved it very, very much. But then I got so excited about mixing and dabbing and just experimenting that I used a little too much blue, and it wasn't the effect that I wanted to achieve. It was still beautiful, just, something to remember for next time. Just plan your colors well. It's very hard to plan colors when you don't know what the colors can do. I have to say, I'm not exactly sure if those paints are supposed to be mixing, because these projects have been drying for a couple of weeks now, and I am convinced that they are not dry yet, because when I pick them up, they leave dye on my hands. Just a little bit, but they do. So I'm not exactly sure what's happening there. I wasn't supposed to bake it or anything like you would with a ceramic paint, maybe. So yeah, I'm not exactly sure what's happening there. Here you can see what I was talking about. I first brushed a very, very thin layer of the color I'm using, and then I'm coming back to just nicely dab a texture on it, and it really creates this beautiful, it really looks like textured glass, like something you would see at a church, or some like really nice complicated piece of stained glass. I loved it. And with the round ones, because I had so many little details with those little round leaves, I decided to actually leave the brush marks just as they were. I decided to make it a thin layer to add a little bit of contrast and see if that would read as contrast. What I've also learned is that with round surfaces like this, once all the sides were colored, it actually started blending together. It probably would have been a better decision to leave a little bit of white in there somewhere, because as you can see, it's just all very blue. The colors start to blend together. But they're still beautiful. They do exactly what I want them to do. I can't have green plants on my window, so at least I have green glass. And when the sun shines through it, it's just gorgeous. I absolutely love it. And the nicest part about it, that even in the evening or in the fall times when, it's in the fall, the night comes earlier, I can put a candle in it and it will still look absolutely beautiful. And I've recorded at the very end a little clip for you guys to see, because it just looks magical in my opinion when you just put a candle in it. And here I'm showing you just how it looks like. And that's pretty much it for the project. It took me a very long time to finish it. It was, I believe, over a course of a week. And it's just a 15 minutes video, so it doesn't really show how long it took. Mostly drying periods though, so not really the painting. I hope you've enjoyed it. There will be more projects coming, and yeah, thank you so very much for watching. If you would like to see more of my works, there are links in the description to different things that you can follow me on. And if you are interested to know what happened to me, there is a little story in the descriptions as well. Thank you so very much for being here again. I will see you in the next video. Bye!